Good evening and hello and welcome everyone to our special council meeting for Wednesday, May the 21st. I would like to advise you that this meeting is live streamed, audio and video recorded, and shall form part of the record which will be retained according to the town's retention bylaw. And if you'd like more information about the retention bylaw, you can collect that from the clerk's office. We'll start the evening with our land acknowledgement. The town of Innisfil acknowledges that we are situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. We also acknowledge that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It's shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beausoleil First Nation, the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We're dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We do have quorum this evening. I do have regrets from Councillor Drodge and Councillor Ices, who are unable to join us tonight. Councillor Waters is joining us virtually. So with that, we'll move forward with the meeting. I'd ask for a mover and a seconder, please, to approve the agenda for May the 21st, 2025. Deputy Mayor Fowler, Councillor Saunders, all those in favor? That is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I just wondered through the clerks if it's possible to have Councillor Waters' screen up so we can see him voting. Is it possible to have him somewhere on the screen so people can see his vote, or if he declared any pecuniary interest? While you're working on that, we will continue. So there are two items on the agenda tonight. The first item is for information and public consultation purposes only, and no decision will be made. The other item concerns an application for an amendment to the town's community planning permit system, our Shores Bylaw 062-17, and a recommendation is being considered by council this evening. Can I have, I've already done that. The first item concerns a proposed community planning permit system, Alcona and Shoreline. We will start with a presentation from staff and the consultant, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear from members of the public. All speakers will have 5 minutes to ask their questions or express their comments, and then the staff or the consultant will respond where possible. Should anyone need to speak for a second time to an issue that has not already been raised or to receive clarification, they'll be granted an additional 5 minutes. From the amount of people in the room tonight, I don't think we're going to have a problem with that, but after all the members of the public have provided comments, council may provide any comments or ask questions. Should any member of the public watching on our live stream, thank you for joining us, wish to comment, they can email clerk services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and will be taken into consideration before council makes a decision. You may also be added to a circulation list as an item, as an interested party, and will be updated on any further information regarding this item. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is available on tonight's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. Now we'll hear from our clerk, Patty Toma, on how public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of this public meeting was provided to required agencies on May 1st, 2025, and the notice was published to Innisfil Today on May 1st, 2025 as well, in accordance with the Planning Act. Information and materials respecting the draft CPPS bylaw were also made available on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Has any correspondence been received by clerk services?
Thank you, Your Worship. 3 pieces of correspondence has been received by the clerk's office. First piece was from Innovative Planning Solutions on behalf of Cooks Bay Marina, dated May 15, 2025, requesting that 257 Beach Road and 269 Maple Grove Drive be removed from the community permit planning system. Second piece of correspondence was received from Metrolinx, dated May 21st, 2025, providing proposed general zoning bylaw provisions for consideration. The third piece was from Simcoe County District School Board, dated May 21st, 2025, stating that continued collaboration with the town will be required to ensure that appropriate public school accommodation is available during the increased housing and density. Also, members of the public may still provide comments or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or until council makes a decision by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now hear from Brandon Correa, Manager of Planning, and David Riley from SGL Planning and Design Incorporated, who will provide further context to the CPPS Alcona and Shoreline.
Hello, Madam Mayor and members of council and staff and members of the public here today. My name is David Riley from SGL Planning and Design. I'm one of the consultants working for the town on this project. I'm joined also by Justine Gincola, partner at Dillon Consulting, who is catching an early flight tomorrow morning, so she's joining us virtually tonight. Happy to be here. We've just had a nice open house last week on this proposed bylaw, and this is following extensive consultation throughout with members of the community, the public, technical staff, of course, council. Lots of input has been received, so we're happy to be here presenting the bylaw and happy to hear further comments as we finalize it. There we go, this is working. And of course, just want to thank, it's been great working with the town staff as usual. Shout out to Andrea, Brandon, and Savannah in particular on this project, but I can't leave out Steve and Kirsten because you guys are always helpful as well. I know that council will be very familiar with what is a CPP bylaw. Of course, the town already has a CPP bylaw called Arshore. But for those that might be listening to the public, just as a quick summary, a CPP bylaw, you can think of it like a zoning bylaw in that it does regulate the use of land and what you can do on it and setbacks, heights, etc. But it's a little bit broader than that in that as a process, it combines zoning bylaw amendments, site plan approvals, and minor variances all into one process in more of a streamlined development approvals fashion. Essentially, so what you can think about the benefits of this. So you got shorter approval timelines. There's a 45-day approval window. With that, you can get housing to market quicker. You can support local priorities such as your shoreline, which is really the genesis of the existing Arshore bylaw that exists in the town. There are powers to delegate certain approvals to staff for those more minor applications. There's also a mechanism to allow the town to secure community benefits in exchange for additional density through a community planning permit bylaw. And I sort of mentioned this a little bit in what's the same as a community planning permit bylaw compared to a zoning bylaw, but what's different is that the delegated approvals certainly is one thing. The other main difference is that you can issue conditional approvals. So if something is mostly there, staff can actually issue, or council can issue, a conditional approval contingent on certain matters being addressed. It could be an agreement being entered into, such as a site plan agreement, for example. It's called a community planning permit agreement in this case, but it's the same thing. Or a further technical study that needed to be a little bit more fleshed out before that final permit is granted. I won't go through all the words that you'll see on the next slides, but it's good. This table here, or this chart, is actually contained within the bylaw, and it outlines the important steps for an application under the community planning permit bylaw. The first step is an important step, which is pre-consultation, which we're actually requiring, and we're of the opinion that we are able to require this. There's been recent legislative changes in the planning world that haven't really affected how a community planning permit system is implemented. So that's another benefit of the system. Requirement for pre-consultation. At the pre-consultation, all the study requirements will be laid out, and the class, depending on what the application is, it'll be assigned either a Class 1, Class 2, or Class 3, and I'll explain what that means, but the difference is basically the difference between a staff delegated approval versus a council delegated approval. And the difference in how you tell is really the degree to what is being varied. After pre-consultation, there's the application submission. Once all of the materials that were identified as required are submitted, that gets submitted, comments are received, and once all the comments are received, that's when the clock starts ticking for the 45 days. Notification is sent out for Class 2 and Class 3 applications. Then there's an application review period, and then finally the decision. So as I mentioned, the decision, whether it's a staff delegated application or council, there are 3 options. You can approve it subject to conditions, so that's provisional approval, or you can refuse the application. And with community planning permit systems, it's similar to how most other planning applications are today, where there are limited appeal rights really to just the applicant. Pretty much the applicant can just appeal. I mentioned the permit classes, and I did go through it, but right now your bylaw, your Our bylaw has it flipped around, where a Class 3 is actually where it comes in and it meets everything, all the bylaw standards. A Class 2 is similar to what a Class 2 is here. It's a staff delegation, and a Class 1 is what goes to council. We're, through this bylaw update of Our Shore and adding in Alcona, we're flipping it. And the reason we're flipping it is it's a little bit more intuitive to think as a Class 1 as something that is just a go, and a Class 3 that is a little bit more complicated and needs to go to council. And the other reason, of course, is that all of the other community planning permit bylaws that exist or are being developed right now have this structure in terms of permit classes. So it's just maintaining consistency with what is out there right now. So it'll be a little bit of an exercise to start thinking about it backwards from what you've been thinking about, but hopefully eventually that settles in everyone's minds. The bylaw also has certain exemptions. They're all listed here, but if development is consistent with a pre-existing site plan agreement, you don't need to apply for a permit. And all of these situations, of course, are assuming that all of the bylaw provisions like setbacks, heights, everything comply. So if you're doing interior renovations, even if you're building a single or a semi-detached dwelling, in today's world, you don't have to go, if you comply, you don't have to go get a permit and then a building permit. You can still go get a building permit directly. You don't have to get a community planning permit if you're building a compliant single or semi-detached dwelling. Maintenance of buildings or structures or repairs to those buildings, seasonal water structures, storage sheds, and certain levels of fill if it's less than 7 cubic meters or 2 half-ton loads. Friday Harbor is not subject to the CPP bylaw. Even when it goes to a town-wide, there is reasons for that. It's a very specific crafted bylaw that is just going to stay as it is. And then exemptions also for portable classroom and projects initiated by a public authority, such as the town of Innisfil, for example. Now I'll just take you through a little bit through each section of the bylaw very, very briefly. They're all listed here, structured similarly to your zoning bylaw, really, and contains many of the same elements that you'll see. Section 1 is the first section, administration and interpretation. This is really setting out how to read the bylaw and how it works. It also sets out a really important section called, which is 1.10, which is criteria for variations from standards. This is the criteria that any decision that is being evaluated and made for a permit application are going to be measured against. And we've created this set of criteria that is a little bit more broad than and community developed and focused than just the 4 tests under Section 45(1) of the Planning Act when you assess a minor variance. It captures a few extra elements, such as community character. And for the shoreline, there's actually additional criteria that comes from the objectives of your shoreline bylaw. We made that criteria. So it has a little bit more teeth in what you're evaluating and a change to what is being proposed to what you have right now. And hopefully that turns into something actually on the ground once applications start coming through. Section 1 also explains the delegation of applications, who decides on what class, as I explained, and also transition provisions for that. That means when this bylaw comes into effect, what happens to existing building permit applications that are out there, or applications for zoning bylaw amendment that might have already been filed. There's also a section on facilities, services, and matters, and this you can think of as another term for community benefits. But the bylaw actually sets out what facilities, services, and matters can be provided in exchange for requests for increases in height or density. The bylaw also sets out what affordability thresholds for ownership and rental units are in Innisfil, because one of those elements that you can require in exchange for additional height and density is affordable housing units. So this is another tool outside of inclusionary zoning where the town will actually be able to require affordable housing only in the case of additional height and or density. But it's something, and we thought we needed to put it in the bylaw to give the town another tool to move forward to be able to require those affordable housing units, which currently doesn't exist. Section 2, definitions. Don't really need to explain that. It's self-explanatory. General provisions, similar to what you see in your zoning bylaw. Here you would find provisions that apply to not specific, I should say in the language of a community planning permit bylaw, we don't use the word zones, we use the word precincts, but you can think of them the same way. We just don't call them zones because this is not a zoning bylaw. But the general provisions apply to all of the precincts. There'll be matters such as additional housing units and accessory structures and provisions that require certain setbacks and whatnot. Parking and loading provisions, similar to what you have in the bylaw today. We've updated the standards slightly based on more current parking rates that might exist in municipalities that have done recent zoning bylaw updates or community planning permit bylaw updates. Minimum loading spaces. We've also added some requirements for electrical vehicle parking spaces for some of those higher density residential, mixed use, and commercial developments. And then you get into the precinct provision. So this is what most people will be looking at when they open the bylaw. What can I do on my property? We've simplified. Currently, you have a large number of zones within Alcona, where we've simplified it into 3 main precincts: residential low density 1, low density 2, and residential medium density. Everything is organized in a table. P means it's permitted. If there's a little number beside it, there might be a condition attached to it. The letter D means discretionary, where it wouldn't be permitted as of right, but they could apply for a Class 2 permit, which is a staff approval, where staff might say, well, based on these circumstances, this use is or is not appropriate. And then they could move forward with that. And then here's an example of what some of the precinct regulations look like. And you can see here, I'll point out minimum lot area, for example, for the residential low density 1 precinct is 600 square meters. And then you have the second column, or the third column, I should say, which says staff variation class 2 permit. So it says up to 10% reduction. That means that if there was a minimum lot area proposed at 550 square meters, that is just under a 10% reduction from 600, 60 being 10%. So that application would be considered by staff for approval. But if there was a greater than 60 square meter reduction in the lot area, that application would actually have to be considered by council. So the bylaw sets out these thresholds for each provision, essentially, within the bylaw. And this is just essentially getting at the larger application should go to council, but some of the more minor things, because we've gone through this public process in developing this bylaw, we leave it to staff and just kind of have the more major matters go to council. Section 6 is the commercial and mixed use precincts. So we've got the mixed use and the neighborhood commercial precincts here. Similar structure in terms of the permitted uses and the regulation tables. Section 7 is the commercial, community service, open space, and environmental protection precincts. And associated regulations with those. And then Section 8 are the site-specific exceptions. And what those are your existing zoning bylaw has several site-specific exceptions within the geography of this bylaw that we're speaking about tonight. So all of Alcona and the shoreline. So all of those site-specific exceptions, staff went through a really great exercise to review all of them. We're carrying them forward all in this bylaw. So if you have an existing permission today on your property, that's being carried through on this bylaw. But where we were able to simplify the exceptions, we did that. So if the minimum lot area was permitted a reduced lot area of 200 square meters, and now that main precinct regulation, it's been changed to permit that anyway, we can remove that element because it's already complying with the bylaw. So we've gone through that exercise to simplify them as much as possible, and then updated. A lot of these site-specific provisions refer to specific tables in the zoning bylaw. Well, those were all updated to refer to the equivalent table in the CPP bylaw. So it was a little bit of a larger exercise, but worth it because it makes it more of a user-friendly bylaw where you don't actually have to go back to the original bylaw and see, okay, what is this? And go back to the zoning bylaw and see what was the actual exception. We've updated all of them. And then we've created, so there is a really nice online map that is interactive, where you, just like your zoning bylaw, where you can zoom in on the property, see where site-specific exceptions are, see what your precinct is. And then, of course, the bylaw is available online as well. And these are just two examples of what those maps look like. So these are the static maps, where if you were coming into town hall and wanted to see a bylaw, these would be within the bylaw itself, but online, same information, just in an interactive format. And that is a summary of the bylaw, and I'm thankful for the bit of a longer presentation, but just wanted to make sure that I provided that detail. And I'm happy to answer questions at the appropriate time, if that is now or later.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. So it'll be a bit later, but stay tuned. We'll hear next from members of the public who have questions or would like to provide comment on this matter. I understand that no one is registered to speak virtually, so I'll ask, is there anyone in person in attendance here at Town Hall that wishes to come forward to the podium and provide comments? Mr. Geese, please come forward.
Worship, members of council. I appear this evening as a longtime resident of this town. As a matter of fact, I was 3 months old when I came here, and that was almost 8 decades ago. So I've seen the shoreline change, and in many cases, for the benefits of the community. One, I would like to thank Andrea Lee and Brandon Carrera for working to update the shoreline bylaw that presently exists. And Kevin, if you would pull up that first slide, and that's not it. Okay. There we have 2 buildings that were built about 10 or 12 years ago. And to me, they're attractive. And the side yard requirements for those buildings is 5 feet on either side of the building. So therefore, you have a 40-foot product on a 50-foot lot with side yards of 5 feet. And if we could go to the next slide. Now, under the present bylaw, it says that you must have 10 feet on either side of the building. So therefore, you see a cottage there to the right, which is a lovely building. And now, under your present bylaw, you have this building that is only 30 feet wide with 10 feet on each side as a side yard. So the only way you could build on that lot is to build up. So therefore, the poor neighbor on the right-hand side gets that shadowing effect from that tall building. He loses his privacy because of that tall building. And I submit that that's not good planning. If we could go to the next slide. Again, there's the building that goes up to whatever height that is, which I believe is excessive. And there's a lovely building to the right with the old setbacks. Next slide, please. Now, there are 2 buildings there. There's that old one in front, and that used to have solar panels on it. It was one of the first to have solar panels. But then you can see the new building next to it. And if you would go to the next slide, not that one, we'll go, keep on going. Try one more. And again, there we go, okay. So instead of building from lot line to lot line or with a side yard requirement of, let's say, 1.5 meters, there's your 3 meters, and the only way they could build is going up. Now, the problem with just going up is that at my age, and when I retire in a few years, I would like a bedroom on the main floor. I would like a laundry room on the main floor. I would like a washroom on the main floor and an office. And if you have a building of that type, you can't have it. You have to go up. So therefore, after discussions with Andrea and Brandon, we've come to a compromise of 1.5 meters on each side, okay, which is 5 feet. And I think that's reasonable. By the way, in Alcona, if you have a 50-foot lot, you can build with 1.2 meters on either side. And I might further suggest that maybe it should be 1.5 meters on one side and 1.2 meters on the other side, which would be a blend of zoning for Alcona and the shoreline. Therefore, you would have more coverage. You wouldn't have the height that the present bylaw requires for you to utilize the lot. So, the present bylaw is too restrictive. It's causing us to build a 30-foot product on a 50-foot lot, And I concur with what your staff and your consultants have done. And I thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Geist.
Okay.
Much appreciated. Is there anyone else, any other member of the public that would like to comment on this public consultation session? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, I'll just check to see if there's anybody online.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there is no one online, and we have not received any correspondence during the course of this meeting.
Thank you. I'll now go to members of council to see if they have any questions or comments. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question is, I understand the reasoning behind the request of changing the side yards setbacks. My question is, what now stops a person, without lowering the height of the building, now what stops a person from building that exact same building, but now just makes it wider and puts those walls closer to the neighbors, which even makes it more, intrusive to that neighbor. So without reducing the heights, you're just allowing people to build the same height and build something more massive. And I understand why you want to do it, but I think people are just going to try to build the same building, same height, with now the walls closer to their neighbors.
Thank you. Mr. Correa?
Thank you. Through Mayor Dolan over to Councillor Waters. So we did actually drop the as-of-right building heights at the same time of looking at the setbacks. In terms of what staff can approve at a class 1 or 2 level, it's about a meter less than what we could have done previously. And so if you're going beyond class 2, it would be subject to a more thorough review and a council approval. So there was a trade-off. We've been more generous with the setback, but the as-of-right heights have come down.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. I didn't hear that in Mr. Geese's statements about the lowering the height. So that's nice. But does the lowering the height, because I think that was a 3-story picture that he showed us, does that still allow for a 3-story flat roof house to be built there, and still give the mass that would intimidate a neighbor?
Mr. Correa or Mr. Riley, whoever wants to answer.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Waters. So it would be, I suppose you could, but it would be a much lower 3-story, and I think it would be difficult to build a 3-story in this case. The other thing I wanted to note was that additional criteria that I mentioned that we added, the criteria that you would assess any application for a community planning permit. One of the ones specific to the shoreline says, the proposal blends built form and natural features in a manner that is compatible with the existing character of the shoreline area, visible from both land and water. And so this is the kind of wording that was in the objectives of the Our Shore bylaw, but it didn't have any, there was no way to relate back to that when you were making a decision. The criteria to make a decision for a permit application was pretty simple. Now the requirement will be to refer back to this, plus of course, those reduced the height and a little bit wider setbacks, a little bit reduced setbacks to allow for a little bit of a wider building, hopefully lower building.
Okay. All right. I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Anyone else have any questions or comments? I should have noted right from the beginning, Director Lee is with us virtually too, if anybody has a question for her. I have a couple. So first of all, you talked about transition in the beginning. How are we handling the transition between class 1 and class 3? Like, because now our very next public meeting is going to be class 1, soon to be known as class 3, and I could see that getting confused. Have we thought about that transition?
Through Mayor Dolan, I mean, from my perspective, it's mostly nomenclature. And so there's a few years of experience where we've issued class 1 permits. Future staff reports would refer to class 3 permits. And so anything moving forward once this bylaw is adopted would would follow really the consistent approach of every other municipality that has a CPPS or that's working on one. We just want to be consistent so that if someone's doing business in, let's say, Guelph, where we're working on a CPPS, that the classes would be consistent and match up with Innisfil. So for the most part, for me, it's more of a nomenclature piece. It shouldn't actually change the transition of how those developments are reviewed.
Thank you. And Alcona, the boundary, it was the map as I tried to zoom in further became quite fuzzy. The southern boundary is the 7th, the 6th? I couldn't tell on my map. It looks like it could be the 6th.
So through Mayor Dolan, it's predicated based on the boundaries of the official plan for Alcona.
Okay.
And so it does jog on the southern limit. I'd have to take a closer look just to confirm exactly the boundary.
Thank you. And I guess my larger question is more about how a CPPS versus a zoning bylaw deals with provincial legislation. We've got so much provincial legislation coming out right now. So I'll use, for example, as of right ADUs. So how is that captured? Is there as of right ADUs in a CPPS?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Madam Mayor, yes, there are, in Alcona, there's as of right permission for 2 additional dwelling units. However, I will say for the shoreline, it's really sticking to what exists today. The Lake Simcoe Protection Plan limits additional dwelling units on lots within 100 meters of Lake Simcoe. That still remains, and that provision is actually spelled out in the bylaw. One of the other things in terms of other provincial legislation, and it's hard to keep track of all the changes, one of the more I guess changes in the last couple of years had been changes of what planning staff and council can consider through site plan applications. Site plan control as a tool doesn't exist when you have a community planning permit bylaw. And the reason for that is because the community planning permit system actually incorporates the whole site plan tool under the umbrella of a community planning permit bylaw. So everything that you could do in a site plan control application prior to the legislative changes from a couple years ago that stripped away some stuff that you could control, you can do all of those things under the community planning permit umbrella still. So for units, for a townhouse development that is maybe 9 units and not 10 units, because site plan doesn't apply to developments with less than 10 units. But you can think about why you would want a 9-unit townhouse development to go through a site plan process, because you still have to think about garbage location and access and maybe an agreement that's registered on title to deal with landscaping and all that. You can achieve all of that still through a community planning permit system, and that is one of those real benefits of the system. We think that the reason why they didn't change that as it relates to a community planning permit system is that this is already an efficient process that considers everything all as one package in a shorter approval timeline. Whereas I think a lot of the other changes we kept hearing were to, the word red tape goes around, eliminate red tape and all that. So this is not red tape, I think, in the eyes of the province. So hope that just provides one example of how this addresses that.
Thank you very much. And it's still a fairly rare tool, is it not? Most municipalities don't have CPPS yet. They're still using traditional zoning bylaws and site plan.
Yeah, through to Madam Mayor, yes, it's certainly growing. We have a bylaw that was recently approved in Guelph, and that's been expanding to the downtown. That was just in the last month or so. Huntsville and Lake of Bays have townwide bylaws. Innisfil, of course, has the Our Shore bylaw. One other municipalities that are actively developing CPP bylaws are Waterloo for their urban growth center and Earp Street corridor, Peterborough, the town of Caledon for a section of Bolton that's within a future MTSA. There are some municipalities that have, Burlington, I should say. I'm looking at Justine on the screen. They have an adopted in principle CPP that can't actually be approved until the MTSA policies are approved by the province. So that one's kind of stuck there. But it's certainly a tool. City of Brampton, they're looking at one for their Queen Street corridor. Peterborough has recently made the decision to go town-wide like Innisfil. So it's certainly something that is gaining a lot of traction. There are many other municipalities that have just issued RFPs and are just starting the process to do this. So in the last 3 to 5 years, it's really ramped up.
Thank you very much. And I am really bad using acronyms, ADU, additional dwelling units, as are you, an MTSA, a major transit settlement area.
Thank you, yes.
So then one last question, and I don't know whether this is maybe a legal question and not a planning question, but I want to talk about the shoreline and water lots. We have some historic water lots within the municipality where the property extends out into the water in some cases. I wish Mr. Geist was still here. He would know what I was talking about, but maybe I'll leave that for the legal team to talk about that one. Anyone else? Did I spark any questions from anybody? Seeing none, we'll now go to the recommendation and receive comments provided this evening. So please, can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendation? Councillor Constantine and Councillor Zanella, all those in favor? That is carried. Anyone who wishes to provide comment regarding the community planning permit system, Alcona and Shoreline, may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this item is considered by council by contacting the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca or signing up on the form on the table outside the council chambers. Now we'll move to the second item on tonight's agenda, which concerns a proposed amendment to the town's community planning permit system, our shore bylaw 062-17, and a Class 1, soon to be Class 3, permit for 1260 Shoreline Drive. This application is being recommended for council's consideration tonight. We'll start with a presentation from staff, and then the consultant on behalf of the applicant will be invited to speak. Then we'll have the opportunity for public consultation. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to comment, they can email clerk services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a decision this evening. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from Clerk Patty Toma on the public notice of this meeting and how it was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. In accordance with Section 1.4.4 and Section 2.1.4 of the CPPS bylaw, notice for this public meeting was provided by placement of signs on the street and lake frontages of the property on May 1st, 2025. Notice was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on April 30th, 2025, and to all required agencies on May 1st, 2025. Information and materials respecting this application were also posted on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you, Ms. Toma. And has any correspondence been received by clerk's office concerning this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office. Members of the public may still provide comment or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or until council makes a decision by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you. We'll now hear from our presenters regarding this application. First, Kirsten Morris, Senior Planner for the Town of Innisfil, will provide a high-level summary of the application. Then Nick Scarrett, Senior Planner for Innovation Planning Solutions, will provide further planning context on behalf of the applicant. Ms. Morris.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. This public meeting is to consider a proposed bylaw amendment and Class 1 variations to the Community Planning Permit System, or CPPS bylaw, for 1260 Shoreview Drive. The purpose of the application is to permit an in-water boathouse and dock area, and the applicant is seeking a Class 1 planning permit and a CPPS bylaw amendment. The CPPS bylaw amendment proposes an increased accessory structure lot coverage from 120 meters squared to 178.9 meters squared under Section 5.2.1C of the bylaw. And the Class 1 variances proposed include a reduced interior side yard setback on the east side of the boathouse from 7.62 meters to 6.97 meters, an increased maximum height of the boathouse from 3 meters to 4.36 meters, an increased projection of the boathouse from 10 meters to 11.62 meters, and an increased maximum width of the boathouse from 7 meters to 10.49 meters, and these variances are under Section 5.2.2 of the bylaw. So the property is located outside of a settlement area and has an area of approximately 2,639 meters squared and 36 meters of frontage on Shoreview Drive with 51 meters of water frontage on Lake Simcoe. The lands have an existing two-story single detached dwelling and are subject to the provisions of the CPPS bylaw, and surrounding land uses are primarily residential. So the application has been evaluated by staff in accordance with the evaluation criteria that is outlined in Section 1.9 and 2.14 of the CPPS bylaw, and those criteria are listed on this slide. Staff's analysis of each of these criteria is detailed within the staff report on tonight's agenda, DSR 072-25, and later on in the presentation, the applicant will provide some further detail about how the application meets these criteria. We've only received comment from Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, who has reviewed the application and provided their support of the proposal. For next steps, staff are recommending approval of the CPPS bylaw amendments and Class 1 variations tonight, if there are no objections from council or members of the public, as staff have found the application to meet the evaluation criteria that was listed on the last slide, and as detailed within the staff report. I'll now pass the presentation over to the applicant, Nick Scarrett, to continue.
Good evening, council, public, and staff. My name is Nick Scarrett with Innovative Planning Solutions, here on behalf of the applicant to hear a singular bylaw amendment and shoreline Class 1 permit variations for the property known as 1260 Shoreview Drive. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a brief overview of the proposed development and associated amendments. As you can see on the screen, these two images, the property is located within the shoreline residential area land designation of the official plan and within the CPPS bylaw as illustrated on the one on the right. Both the official plan and shoreline bylaw permit accessory uses such as boathouses and in conjunction with dwelling units. This proposal is to facilitate the construction of an in-water single-story, two-boat slip boathouse and associated permanent dock. The permit of the boathouse will follow the variations listed by staff previous in this presentation, which are: 1, a bylaw amendment to increase the total lot coverage of accessory detached structures. Class 1 permits would be increase the height, width, projection, and decrease the exterior side yard, the side yard of the east for the boathouse. An existing path, you can see that kind of central to the picture. It's a little landing. It's about halfway down the slope. Will be utilized as an access point to the boathouse. 1 for an elevated platform and one from a lower shoreline platform. These are drastically reducing impacts to the existing shoreline and vegetation while promoting safe access to the boathouse. As shown in this image, the boathouse can contain 2 boat slips and a flat roof deck for amenity area. The lower dock will provide direct access to water amenities. You can kind of see in the bottom 2 images that the slope of the boathouse relative to the proposal is generally low and minimal in height. Here are some renderings of the proposed boathouse. You can see on the top left image, there's a pedestrian bridge or elevated walkway. That is about halfway up the slope. So the proposed boathouse is about 4.36 meters in height from the high water mark of the lake. And from the high water mark to the top of the slope is about 7 meters. So the entire boathouse cannot be viewed from land because of the slope, which is essentially why we designed it in that location and in keeping with the natural features of the property. This image provides a layout of the requested bylaw amendment and Class 1 variations. The first one is for an accessory structure total lot coverage. Total lot coverage for detached accessory structures include boathouses, docks, elevated walkways, landings, stairs, decks. And in a Class 1 variation, you're allowed to go up to 160 meters squared. This proposal is 178.9 meters squared, which is really 18.9 meters above a Class 1, which is triggering the bylaw amendment. And most importantly, with all these detached accessory structures, such as the boathouse, it is only 6.78% of the total lot area. And the result of that is that detached accessory structures are not the dominant feature of the property. The existing dwelling is approximately 14% of the total lot coverage. The Class 1's variations for height, projection, width, and side yard setback are reflective of the proposed boathouse and take into consideration the unique characteristics of the site. By providing a centrally located structure in water as a single story reduces shoreline and site impacts. Thoughtful and functional design, ultimately providing access points, maintain and promote the existing vegetation and slope stability. The shoreline bylaw contains tests, and each variation must be analyzed against these tests. These 6 tests together are justified in the next few slides. There are a number of bullet points there I'll summarize. In short, the proposed is appropriate for orderly development of the property, reduces impacts and integrates into natural environment and site characteristics, increase of natural protection features such as increased vegetation along the shoreline and reduced site disturbance based on the proposal, maintains the intent of the shoreline bylaw by improving upon existing conditions while offering safe access to lake shore amenities, maintains the intent of the official plan to protect ecological functions of the lake and aid in slope erosion. And finally, the proposal aligns with the PPS and LSPP. A little bit of history on this site. It did receive a shoreline bylaw approval for on-land boathouse that was in the slope. That was a number of years ago. Ownership has changed, designs have changed, and they've come up with a more appropriate development that is in line with the existing characteristics of the property while protecting that existing vegetation and unique shoreline to this area. To note, all requested variations for bylaw amendment and Class 1 permits take into account the existing features of the site and blend them into a proposal that is reflective of the shoreline development. It is my opinion that the proposal meets the 6 tests of the shoreline bylaw, improves on existing features of the property and protects existing vegetation while allowing appropriate form of development. The proposal development promotes efficient use of land, resources, while maintaining compatible with the surrounding area. The proposed development is consistent with all forms of planning legislation. And in my opinion, the subject application represents good planning, and we respectfully request approval of this application. I would like to thank planning staff for their time invested in this application. It's always great to work with very connected staff members with the shoreline. And we've reviewed all comments and reports and have no comments for this. This concludes my presentation, and if you have any other questions, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris and Mr. Scarrett. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding this item. I understand that nobody registered to speak virtually, so I'll go to those in attendance here at Town Hall. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Seeing none, as a reminder, never mind that. I will now ask the clerk if any emails have been received during the meeting.
Thank you, Worship, and no correspondence or emails have come through during the course of this meeting.
I was going to tell everybody they only had 5 minutes to speak, but that wasn't really a problem. So I'll now go to council to ask questions or comments. Council, do you have questions or comments on this item? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the owners for building a more appropriate boathouse. This is what we expect to see, as opposed to a massive building which is trying to be something more than just boathouse. I just want to compliment them for a design that is what it is. It's a boathouse with viewing opportunities off the top of the view. So I just want to compliment them on that. That being said, I do want to ask, is that the natural heritage of the site, because of the extended width of this boathouse, does get obscured from the water side of when you're looking at the cottage and the waterfront. So just kind of curious, was there any way to improve the viewing from the lakeside in terms of the natural heritage of the site, as opposed to what you're going to see now is mostly boathouse, and the protected shoreline, which they've done a nice job of protecting, is now obscure to any view from the lake at all?
Mr. Scarrett.
Through you, Your Worship, to address Councillor Waters' question. The proposed boathouse is approximately 26% of the existing shoreline. So in built form context, it actually is preserving most of the vegetation from view on the east and west sides of the existing shoreline. And because the location is utilizing existing access points, there is limited or minimal disruption in that shoreline area. So utilizing that existing location helps promote the existing vegetation while minimizing built form along the shoreline. Another item to note is, through our architect, is we tried to slim down the width as much as possible while making it functional to get to those boat slips. So in the renderings, or in the package submitted as part of this application, you'll see that the walkways to access these boat lifts is about 2 feet. That's quite narrow. Traditionally, you'd probably want to see something around 5 feet to actually safely access these locations, but we wanted to take that into consideration and be mindful of that built form width along the shoreline.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also want to echo Councillor Waters' comments. It's refreshing to see a kind of normal boathouse. It's more of a no-frills, a basic, what I expect a boathouse to look like, compared to some of the things that we have seen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then moved by Councillor Saunders and seconded by Councillor Waters. We now, there's the recommendation on the screen. Any final questions or comments on this item, because we are looking to recommend this evening, pass this recommendation? Seeing none. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. We'll now go to anyone who wishes to register as an interested party. I don't know whether that will be required because we've just passed it. So I will say to council, thanks everyone for their participation, and we'll now go to the confirming bylaw and adjournment. So adjourning at 7:30, moved by Councillor Richardson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fowler. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody joining virtually and those who came in person. Have a good rest of your evening.